In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord, but begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers. So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine. Leaving American workers, who I love, and taxpayers to absorb the cost in terms of lost jobs, lower wages, shuttered factories, and vastly diminished economic production. Thus, as of today, the United States will cease all implementation of the non-binding Paris Accord and the draconian financial and economic burdens the agreement imposes on our country. This includes ending the implementation of the nationally determined contribution and, very importantly, the Green Climate Fund, which is costing the United States a vast fortune.
The Green Climate Fund is a unique global initiative to respond to climate change by investing into low-emission and climate-resilient development. GCF was established by 194 governments to limit or reduce greenhouse gas emissions in developing countries and to help adapt vulnerable societies to the unavoidable impacts of climate change.
Not only does this deal subject our citizens to harsh economic restrictions, it fails to live up to our environmental ideals. As someone who cares deeply about the environment, which I do, I cannot in good conscience support a deal that punishes the United States, which is what it does. The world's leader in environmental protection, while imposing no meaningful obligations on the world's leading polluters. For example, under the agreement, China will be able to increase these emissions by a staggering number of years, 13. They can do whatever they want for 13 years, not us.
China announced in January 2017 to invest $292 billion in renewable energy by 2020. The NEA said, installed renewable power capacity including wind, hydro, solar and nuclear power would contribute to about half of new electricity generation by 2020. However, more than half of China's installed power capacity will still be fueled by coal over the same period. China owns 5 of the world's 6 largest solar module manufacturing firms and the largest wind turbine manufacturer. China is cementing its global dominance of renewable energy and supporting technologies, aggressively investing in them at both home and around the globe, leaving countries including the US, UK and Australia at risk of missing the growing market.
Who exactly is influencing the president to withdraw?
Well, most notably, Steve Bannon, the president's chief strategist. I think that is a big part of this. Scott Pruitt, the EPA administrator.
Back in 1995, Steve Bannon gave C-SPAN an interview about Biosphere 2. He was the CEO of the managing company for 2 years.
Last week, the C-SPAN school bus stopped in Oracle, Arizona, site of Biosphere 2.
Biosphere 2 was designed as an environmental lab that replicated, to the degree one can replicate, all the different ecosystems of the Earth. And so it's been referred to in the past as a planet in a bottle. And whereas it's not a direct does not directly replicate Earth. It's the closest thing we've ever come to having all the major biomes, all the ecosystems, plant species, animals, etc., that really try to make an analog for the planet Earth.
Biosphere 2 is much smaller than our planet, so all the systems here work on a much faster, more rapid time scale. The recycling, for example, is much faster from a molecule in the air going through the water back into the air, the cycle. So we are much, it's an accelerated cycle in terms of recycling, which gives you then the power to measure actually what happens, like air pollution, different CO2. You can measure here, instead of waiting generations, you can measure it within, a 6 month period or whatever time scale you take.
What a lot of the scientists who are studying global change and studying the effects of greenhouse gases, many of them feel that the Earth's atmosphere in 100 years is what the Biosphere 2's atmosphere is today. We have extraordinarily high CO2, we have very high nitrous oxide, we have high methane, and we have lower oxygen content. And so the power of this place is allowing those scientists who are really involved in study of global change, and which in the outside world of Biosphere 1 really have to work with just computer simulation. This actually allows them to study and monitor the impact of enhanced CO2 and other greenhouse gases on humans, plants, and animals.
Biosphere 2 ran into problems including low amounts of food and oxygen, die-offs and many animals and plants included in the experiment, squabbling amongst the resident scientists and management issues.
Further, while the current agreement effectively blocks the development of clean coal in America, which it does, and the mines are starting to open up. We're having a big opening in 2 weeks. Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, so many places. A big opening of a brand new mine. It's unheard of. For many, many years, that hasn't happened. They asked me if I'd go. I'm going to try. China will be allowed to build hundreds of additional coal plants. So we can't build the plants, but they can, according to this agreement. India will be allowed to double its coal production.
Clean energy provides more jobs than fossil fuel, and renewable energy is creating jobs 12 times faster than the rest of the economy. And clean energy employs more people than fossil fuels in nearly every US state. According to national polling conducted after the election, most Americans want the US to stay in the Paris Agreement. A majority of self-identified Democrats, Republicans and Independents all want to stay in the Accord.
So in some other research, one of the things that we've done is examine the ways that individuals respond to other countries doing something or not doing something or doing something negative about climate change. One of the things that we saw there was that individuals were slightly more likely to want to do something about climate change if they found out that other countries were making a positive contribution. However, if other countries were making a negative contribution, so for example, that they were increasing their emissions, then Americans were not willing to scale back their own efforts. So in some senses, there was some evidence of positive reciprocity, but not much evidence of negative reciprocity. So that was one interesting finding. Another interesting finding was, in the United States, citizens were willing to, for example, put on sanctions. So other forms of punishment that don't involve changes in our own emissions policies. And that's an interesting thing that we call issue linkage. So many times in international relations, when we can think about clever ways to combine different issues together, so we're taking issues about climate changes and the environment and linking them with things like trade, that then becomes a potential punishment mechanism that individuals are willing to support. But importantly, I think that the more individuals know that there is broader support internationally for doing something about these issues, the more that they themselves will think, hey, I'm willing to get on board with this. And so, in some senses, that's one of the things that I think the Paris Agreement was helpful for, because it was something that showed a broad, across the world coalition of countries saying we need to do something about this.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers. So we're getting out. But we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine. Leaving American workers who are Paris Climate Accord, but begin negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new